Oh, Dave, I hope this isn't going to be the case. You've got a bit of a delay, so that might be interesting to see how that plays out.
Is it delayed?
Unless it's just me.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is so fun. He promised us mayhem, so here we are. Let's see. We'll wait for a few others to figure out how to get to our room. Thanks for being here. Sarah, are you back? Or are you calling in from Korea?
No, I'm back.
Okay.
I wish I was still in Korea.
I know. It looks like a wonderful trip.
It was, thanks.
Okay. Let's see. You're waiting for, got Brad, we've got Lisa, David, Sarah, looking for Tom. There he is. Okay, now the party can start.
There's the fireworks.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We're now 20 minutes into it, so I'm worried that we're going to run out of time. So we'll just get right started, and then people can join as they join. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. This is a discussion on networking. So, and this is what we all do best, or hope to do best. A responsibility to show up isn't just confined to our offices. We've all learned, especially in the past few years, that it's important to spread our wings and seek creativity and getting together, and why expanding with those we know can be life-changing. Showing up for events and networking opportunities can be challenging at times, but if you bring your whole self and stay authentic, relationships developed and unexpected opportunities will present themselves. So I'm just going to introduce myself, Cheri Waldron. I like to call myself a champion of connection and a celebrator of success. And I'm also the executive director to Mountain West Capital Network, which is one of the oldest, most established business networking groups in the Mountain West. I'm obsessed, and I've always been, with entrepreneurs, growing companies, and connecting people. I feel lucky to have discovered the best role and purpose of my personal and professional life is connecting leaders, facilitating relationships, and serving the greatest founders, teams, and companies of today and tomorrow. When Devin Thorpe asked me to lead this panel, I immediately said yes. And then when I was told I could choose who could be on the panel, it was these 5 individuals that came to me right away. And of course, after I reached out, because they too understand the importance of the topic and not only preach it, they practice it, they immediately and enthusiastically said yes. For at least 2 decades, I've supported and celebrated entrepreneurs and investors and allied professional services firms with information about capital creation and business growth, which leads us to today's important topic. What is crowdfunding and networking? By definition, crowdfunding is the use of small amounts of capital from large numbers of individuals, or your network, to finance a new business venture. So for this particular breakout, we'll just talk about the details and who is your crowd. These friends of mine are the best of the best, and today I'm here along with you to learn from them. So I'll do a quick introduction, and I'll start with Brad. Where are you, Brad? There you are. Brad was co-founder in 1983 of this country's first venture accelerator, venturecapital.org, or the Wayne Brown Institute. Now retired, he serves on several economic development boards, and he is an active angel investor. Brad, wave. There you go. Elisa, good to see you. I met her. She first came to me as a volunteer for Mountain West, and she is at everything that I attend. And she's always pitching in, bringing value and bringing together quality groups. She leads by example. Her company, Level Next, is a digital platform designed to connect recruiters and HR professionals with candidates who want to advance their careers through one-on-one mentorship and counseling. Oh, sorry, not counseling, coaching. Okay, David Stahl. Oh, Lisa, wave. There you are. Okay, David Stahl. He is the Utah market president of Hillcrest Bank. He is my newest friend on this panel, and he's from Florida, but I think he probably now knows way more people than I do. He is enthusiastic with involvement with not only Mountain West, but also ACG and the chambers. David is responsible for leading commercial business banking efforts in Utah. David, want to wave? Thank you. Sarah Jones, president of Inclusion Pro, which creates transformative global diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. That is a mouthful. From patent attorney, which is when I first met her, to CEO, Sarah has over 20 years of executive and leadership experience, spanning business technology, content, revenue, and legal strategy. She is also a TED Talk star, not TikTok, TED Talk star. So if you have time, you should look that up. I love watching it, and I watched it several times. So Sarah, thank you for being here. And then Tom Lund, where are you, Tom? There you are. So Tom is an emeritus director of practice development at Tanner, and he is a mentor to all. In a packed house, crowded room, most would raise their hands high if asked who in here feels like Tom is their very best friend. He has over 40 years of practicing what he calls the art of persuasion, and is the author of a methodology called the language of selling. And that just does not even sum up all that Tom is. So thank you, Tom, for being here. I can't imagine doing it without you. So all of these individuals are absolute rock stars in their own right and developing business through relationships and adding value to any situation they're involved in. So I would just like to get started, just dive right in. Despite its growing importance, we still know very little about the underlying network effects of crowdfunding that drive that evolution and growth of it. So let's just start. I want to talk about your go-to tips that help you the most at networking events or otherwise. And Brad, let's start with you.
Great, thanks, thanks, Cheri. One of the important things you need to do whenever you go to an organization, go to a chamber meeting or some sort of networking group that you think may be valuable, is you need to have a strategy. So real quickly, I'm going to read off 10 tips when you go that you should have. You should always go with a goal. What are you going to accomplish? And an agenda to accomplish that goal. You ought to offer to help the organizer, especially if you don't know the group very well, and get advice and help them as you can, so you get to know people and they'll want you to come back. Now, whether you want to go back is another story, but at least you'll be allowed back should you want to go. You need to follow up with friends. You need to meet new people and try to establish a connection. Okay, always be engaged, focused, and listening to those you visit with. Listening is a real key. Facilitate introductions and try to make connections between participants. It's more about helping people out than helping you out, because what you hope to have happen, and often does, is people will help you out as well. Help others get what they need by making those introductions. I've oftentimes talked to someone and they've talked about what they wanted. I've said, oh, you ought to go talk to Tom Lund. You ought to go talk to Sarah Jones, because they have expertise in that area and you need to go visit with them. In any case, in my case in particular, what I would do is close sponsor commitments and talk to people that wanted to be part of the organization that I ran. And I'd also look for new sponsors. Number 9 is learn, because usually when you go to these events, there's a presentation and somebody's going to be talking about something. And you know what? If you don't get something out of that, then that's a bad thing for the organization. And maybe you just weren't listening very well. But I always know I'm going to learn something new, and that's important. And lastly, at these events, there's always food. So I always end up with lunch or breakfast or cocktails or hors d'oeuvres. I mean, I get to eat. So I always make sure that that's one of my goals that's on the agenda for the day. Cheri?
I always forget the eating part. That's great. Anything else to add? The rest of the panel members? I mean, that's a great list, Brad. You came so organized.
I'll share. So this book back here, this guy, is my favorite book, which it goes everywhere with me to every job, but it's How to Win Friends and Influence People, first edition, signed copy by Dale Carnegie. Oh, so happy. But I learned a lot about networking through that book. And my top three, there, Brad's list is way more inclusive, but if you're just looking for a few easy takeaways of where to get started, for me, it's smile, use their name, and for heaven's sake, pronounce it correctly, please, please, please. And if you get stuck, I think networking is really uncomfortable for people that don't know how to do it naturally. Just ask questions about the person you're talking to. People love talking about themselves, and they will think you are the most interesting, fascinating, wonderful person on the planet if you just ask them questions about themselves and listen and validate the things that they have to say. And like Brad said, I think that that's a better way for you to find those connections that are really important for the next part of really conditioning that connection into a stronger network.
Oh, so good. How'd you get that signed copy?
It was a gift from an old CEO, a manager of mine. It was an anniversary gift at the company for my 5 years. And then I resigned 3 weeks later.
Oh. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Those are great, great tips. Anything else before we move on? No? Okay, that's awesome. So moving on, what is a challenge in networking today that didn't exist 3 years ago? And then what makes it better even? Tom, do you want to take this one?
Sure. I mean, the biggest challenge I see is that people are more ADD than ever. The attention span has dropped like a rock over the last 3 years. The irony is that everybody wants to connect. People are starved for connection. And so you have to kind of feed that. I would say that, I've got 6 or 7 tips that I think about all the time when I'm networking. But one of the biggest ones is when in doubt, do something different. I looked at COVID when it first hit. I was huddled in a little room called my office at work. I was one of like 5 or 10 freaks in the office. We were just like, our wives wanted to get rid of us. So we came to the office, but I just decided that I would have to do something different. And so I started to invite people to lunch by the river. If they were out south, I'd pick out a canyon like Big Cottonwood Canyon. And I just tell them, hey, I'll bring the camp chairs and the sandwiches. If they were downtown, we'd meet at Memory Grove. And I can tell you during that weird time when things were peaking, for some people, it was almost like a religious experience. So I've always been a believer in when in doubt, do something different. Look at the stereotypes associated with networking and do the complete opposite of what those stereotypes are. So those are some of my initial thoughts. The other thing that I would tell you is for many years, I've always felt like the art of persuasion, the art of connecting with people is more of a feeling than a fact. And I've never asked the question, and I always try and ask it kind of agnostically, is the art of persuasion more of a feeling or more of a fact? And I've never had anybody say it's more of a fact, even nerdy engineers. And so you have to kind of tap into that. People need to feel something. And when I used to run a big sales team, I tell them, hey, don't ration the passion. Let them feel the zeal. People need to feel something. And to do that, you have to be able to shed some of the crap that's out there in the water. People are playing it safe. People are talking about showing up like it's a big accomplishment. It's not. People are talking about under promising and over delivering, which to me is just an excuse to be mediocre. And if you go for it, you have kind of a go for it mentality in helping people, it attracts. So those are some quick thoughts.
During the pandemic, we certainly had some opportunities to shake it up, look at different ways. And some people really thrived, I think, during that time. We're always used to kind of staying in our lane, but I think Tom gave us some great examples of ways that sometimes actually made it better, and we're carrying on some of those things that we were doing that we normally wouldn't have done, but now we're like, oh gosh, why wouldn't we do it that way? It's better. Love it. How did your networking serve you, David, during the pandemic? What did you find? I mean, you obviously, you came into Utah right at the start, and yet here you are. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Cheri. I just followed Tom Lund up the Big Cottonwood Canyon to Ledgfield. But no, I think one of the really good things that the pandemic did was it really galvanized people around something, some commonality. That and the earthquake, which was a shock for me coming from Florida. Don't have to deal with those there. But I think it gave something common for everyone to rally around, regardless of where you came from. But one of the things that I think the pandemic did was it, as people, still starved for connectivity, sessions like this, really became more prevalent, and I think it really helped, some people who have a hard time working a room connect. So if you think about it, most common networking and event, kind of things, you may go into a room, you attend an event, you go to a room, you may meet 3 to 5 new people, but on most of these like electronic meetings, video conferencing meetings, you usually have 15, 20 people. And so it allowed you to be very intentional about, what you wanted to do and meet people that you probably wouldn't have met if they had 500 people been in a room. So, I think, to what Brad, Elisa, and Tom has said so far, being intentional, standing out, being a little different, and being able to do it in this kind of session was really helpful. And I think that's one of the things that really helped us, not only me moving here, but also building a bank from scratch. It allowed us to really be in more places and continue to be in more places when everyone else was kind of pulling back. So that's really what, that was really one of the benefits that the pandemic had for us as both being new to the market professionally and personally.
Also, your favorite pandemic activity happened to be golf, which people were still able to do, it seemed. It's the best thing for golf ever.
That and Sundance, Cheri, that and Sundance.
Yeah, her 2 vices. Absolutely. How about you, Sarah?
Sorry, I'm trying to find unmute. Yeah, I have a couple of things to add. I hope that are additive, because I really agree with everything folks are saying. I mean, these are all power networkers, so you're going to get so much good advice. I think a couple of things that has really served me over the years is to really try not to turn down a meeting. One of the things when you're a super networker is you get approached a ton. And, I've definitely had plenty of times when I've been ghosted by people, and it's not fun and it doesn't feel good. And I decided I'm not going to be that person. So anytime anyone approaches me, you don't always have to sit down for a 3-hour meal with someone, right? But there's some really nice light touch ways that you can ensure that you're connecting with them somehow in a way that makes them feel valued, right? As a human and as someone who's reaching out to you, probably for some advice or some, now I might turn down a spammy sales call or something like that, right? But you know what I mean, when people are really reaching out to you and wanting to. Now this might be younger college students and things like that, and we're really busy people. So that's just something I've made it as part of my practice, is to just never turn down a meeting wherever possible. One of the things I love is Calendly. I think the pandemic or any sort of calendaring system, the pandemic has really made that very acceptable. And I started playing with Calendly before the pandemic because I was getting really busy, right? And you get approached a lot. And I remember the first time I was so afraid that if I said, hey, love to meet you. Fastest way to connect with me would be through here. And I remember this fear that, oh my gosh, that's going to be off-putting. They're going to think I'm keeping them at arm's length, whatever. I found nobody ever turned down a meeting, an opportunity to schedule with me. And then the way I would schedule them is back-to-back 30-minute slots. And I remember the first time I did that, I was like, I just saved myself like 12 hours this week, right? In those coffee meetings and getting ready. And then, during the pandemic, I just stopped wearing makeup and all that fun stuff we used to do. So that's, I think, been a real blessing from the pandemic, is these other ways to connect that are very, very acceptable. But just, making sure that we still keep humans first, right? Because networking is about humans first, opportunity second. And then the second thing I guess what I would offer is just always consistently create value. I mean, for those, I know some of this network comes from Utah, and Utah's kind of an interesting animal because you see people come and go. And, what's kind of interesting is, Tom, I've known him for 20 years, Brad, I've known him for 20 years, right? So these long relationships over time, and many of us have had career changes over time as well, which really speaks to, I think, the quality of networking that's possible with these long-standing relationships, and always kind of just being interested in each other's success. I mean, that's really what we should always be doing, is celebrating people's journey. How can we help them be successful? And so I don't love the word networking, but that's the word. But I found that there's real power in it if you can really anchor into those types of things. Thanks for letting me share.
I love that. It just struck me that there's 3 of you on here right now that Sarah, Lisa, and David, all that kind of started companies during the pandemic, which is awesome. I love that. So it's a whole new world, actually. This is so interesting. We can move on to this. I think this is always a fun question. It's just more fun than anything else. But in a world of Zoom and virtual meetings, are you one to show up in person, or camera on or camera off? Like how do you feel about that? Elisa, let's start with you. As your camera's on.
Camera's on.
Yeah.
I hope that this question is not a call out to the participants that are not on camera right now.
It's not.
It's not. I'm sure it's not. For me, I was using Zoom and Calendly and doing virtual meetings before the pandemic as part of my work. So at the time, I mean, my background is in HR, but at the time I was doing recruiting for an agency here in Utah. So we were talking to candidates all over the country. This kind of technology was very second nature to me. So I had a bit of a leg up going into the pandemic, and it was of my expectation that people are on video, because this isn't a conference call, it's a video call. But it was surprising to me how many of my colleagues, because I positioned into a different industry, and I was doing more marketing and branding. And I joined that company 2 weeks before we all got put into quarantine. So it was a very big shift and a change for me, going from this is a natural part of my everyday to why are people not showing up? It was odd to me. And what I noticed was there's a big difference in how I personally engaged when I was not on video. When I wasn't on video, I didn't feel like I really needed to pay attention, quite frankly. I mean, I knew that I would be texting on my phone or checking my emails or probably petting my cat, who she's outside of the room today. The door is shut because she would be right. You wouldn't see me. You'd see the cat. But when I was on camera, just like business dress, I think that the conversation in HR communities prior to COVID was, how you dress sets the tone for how you act in the workplace. And I was noticing that was kind of paralleling over now into being on camera, not being on camera. So for me, I try to be accepting of everyone else's, like, I can kind of conform to your comfort zone. So if you don't want to be on camera, that's fine. Do you want me to be on camera? Does it make you uncomfortable if I'm on camera? But I never set the expectation unless there's a bona fide reason that we need to be talking and communicating, which usually is more related to interviews or something where, we need eye contact, or I really, really need those extra verbal cues, being able to see people's behaviors and mannerisms. As you can tell, I talk a lot with my hands. I am one of those people. So when I lose that interaction in a conference call or a Zoom call where we just have a name popping up on the screen, that's very difficult for me because I don't feel a true connection with the other side. It seems very transactional. So where I already feel that some of that's taken away and we're not in person, moving it to a virtual, and then also losing a visual cue system. I don't think it's right or wrong, but at least for me, it's much more difficult to make meaningful connections without it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a place for all of it, and there is no right or wrong. I just think it's an interesting question. I remember back in the day when we would just have, conference calls, and it's true. You just you felt like, you lost people, or there was someone was trying to get noticed or whatever. And now you just like wave your hand and you're able to talk. So I appreciate having a conference call quickness and easy access, yet also having that, connection that you can make, virtually on the screen. Tom and Brad, how do you feel about this? Camera on, camera off. Do you, with all of this technology, what are your thoughts? Or do you still really, really feel passionate about, you got to have that in-person meeting to seal the deal?
I like both. I like to keep the camera on to prove that I've kept my clothes on. But
hey, I don't know, Tom. We're not seeing anything below the water line, so not a guarantee.
Yeah, well, okay.
Stand up.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it could be, but I like both. I think that I think you have to kind of throw down. If people are going to connect more, if they're able to see you. And sometimes when I've had serious conversations with somebody, I'd say, can you imagine having this online? Would it be as good? Probably not. But sometimes online, you've got to go with it with busy people. And if you have a face-to-face, you better make it really, really good.
I agree with Elisa and with Tom. I'd rather do face-to-face when possible. Zoom is better than a conference call or a call on the phone. But face-to-face, I think, is much better. It also depends an awful lot on what you're doing and what you're trying to transact, what you're trying to accomplish. Some things you can do well on the phone, and if you know people well, you can do it on Zoom, and it works great. Zoom was great for me because my organization started using Zoom way long time ago. We started using conference calls all over the country to do things back in the 80s. And so as soon as Zoom came in, we switched to Zoom. So we were up and ready to go for Zoom for the mentoring programs that we did. And so Zoom was a godsend when COVID hit, especially because I'm retired and I subsequently moved to a very rural area. I don't get to see the people that much. And so I'd rather do a Zoom call than just a regular phone call, or my God, a text. I mean, the lowest form of communication, I swear is a text, right?
Hey, be careful, Brad. Be careful.
Well,
Yeah.
we had a rule. I'm sure that since I've left, it's been changed, but we had a rule when I was running venturecapital.org that our interns had to go meet with entrepreneurs whose deal we were reviewing, and they had to go meet them. They couldn't do a call, let alone a text, and to find out things about the company, questions that we had in terms of the investability of a company. And it was important for us to have those interns go and meet the companies. And the interns that were, say, 30 and over, so the MBAs types, they really loved going to meet the companies, and they were amazed that the companies would meet with them. The ones that were younger, it really made them uncomfortable. And but they would call and they would go. So I think it's important that you have that interaction.
I do too. I love it. Sarah, I actually saved this question just for you, just because it really just when I thought of it, I thought, oh gosh, you're just such a great example. But how do you continue to cultivate your network? You've gone from industry to industry and all over, and you just continue, I feel, to just build your network. And tell us a little bit about that. How do you continue to cultivate a network?
Well, this question is very ironic, Cheri, because I actually don't feel like I'm around much anymore. And, you don't see me at all the networking events, I guess, and so it's a little bit ironic that this topic is networking. But I think, after a certain amount of time, you've made the right investments very strategically that you really spend your time wisely. Like, one of the things I'll advise new folks that are coming into networks is, we only have so much time in the day. And so you can't be everywhere all at once, and you can't network with everyone. So, figure out the right amount of time in the right organizations or the right, places to be spending your time. Oftentimes, I'll just give you one example with, I co-founded Women Tech Council. So of course, approached all the time people who want to network more with women. And I would say, well, what do you do for business? Who's your customer? Where are they spending their time? Blah, blah, blah. And look, if someone's really passionate about it, then absolutely spend your time in spaces that you love. But there's also a strategic component of using networking as a career building opportunity as well. So you got to be smart about it. But I think nowadays, cultivating really just looks like just kind of, staying interested in people. It's like there's so much history, right? That I know of, so many people that are on the call. And, that was, Kate, another entrepreneur, right? She and I co-founded the first alumni women's law firm at BYU, like, gosh, I want to say like 20 years ago. Oh, wait, maybe she didn't join this one, but she was in the main room, right? And it's been fun to see her career journey over time, right? And those are things that I find incredibly fascinating, incredibly interesting. And I find that when I do reconnect with someone, there's always more to talk about, right? And so staying interested in people, how are they doing, right? And kind of their growth and development has just been something that I've enjoyed it from networking. So for me personally, I enjoy that. And I've gotten past, I remember when I was a patent lawyer, ironically, I actually was not very good at networking because I thought it was a very transactional thing, right? I'm supposed to go show up, people will give me business. And once it became a very personal thing where I was like, wow, I actually meet the most amazing people. That's what keeps them in my network. And so I'm very interested in how are they doing, and I want to see them succeed.
Cheri, if I may, we're talking here about crowdfunding, and typically in crowdfunding, we're talking about raising money. So how does all this that we've talked about help in doing that? And the way it does is that you build your network. It's your crowd. It's not everybody. You have other people that will join it once it gets launched, once it gets live. But they're the people that are going to help you determine if you have something of value, if other people are going to respond well to it. And you build that network to figure that out. They become your focus group, your marketing group, and could eventually be your investors or customers through crowdfunding. And when you have key people that become part of that network, they help expand the network and they help bring people to you and build your crowdfunding network for you. There is nothing better than having people in your network endorsing you. And endorsing you by buying your product, endorsing you by putting a little money in your deal. Now, not every deal works for crowdfunding, and that's another discussion we can do. But this is why you go around here. You try to find people of commonality, people that you've had a good sense of, gosh, they really have a good head on their shoulders. They really added value to our conversations that we had. They've been helpful to me. I think I've been helpful to them. I want to make sure I stay in touch with them. And so you start building your network. Now, this staying in touch is really important for a company, a startup. Startup companies, when I've met thousands and have worked with thousands of startup companies, okay, especially most of them in the tech space. And one of the things that entrepreneurs don't understand is that after they've done their pitch, after they've met people, after they've done all those things, they move on. And one of the most important things for an investor to know is they believe that in 6 months, that company is going to be gone. It's going to be dead. Why? Because 90% of businesses, 95%, I think according to the SBA, in terms of startups, fail. And they're going to fail within a year. Okay. It's just the way it is. Our organization had a 70% success rate, 80% success rate after 10 years. So one of the things I've encouraged people to do is start informing your network about goals that you've accomplished, things that you've done. They're not necessarily press release worthy. They don't have to be that large. They can be 5 lines that just brings people up to date that you're making progress and that most importantly, you are still in business. Because most people have written you off long ago. But if you do that once every 3 weeks, once a month, you don't have to do a fancy newsletter. It's just an email. It's a tickle list. And it says, hey, we hired a new person. Hey, we signed a new client. Hey, we raised a little money. Hey, we've got new office space. Hey, a patent was granted. This tells people that you're still in the game, that you're making progress. And you know what? I ask you to invest in me. Maybe that's not such a bad idea.
No,
Hey, Cheri, before we move on, I think Marisol has her hand raised virtually.
yes,
Is that a
yes,
question?
yes. Marisol, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, thank you. Brad, you touched on a couple of my questions, so thank you. But I'm curious to know a little bit of the for younger generations, right? This space is growing exponentially, and we're seeing new leaders really enter the space, whether it's social impact, an entrepreneur, whatever it may look like. And it can be extremely intimidating for someone who isn't particularly the networking isn't their forte. And one of those fears is really, how do you go in and make your ask? And what does that look like? Because for women particularly, it can be very intimidating to go in and say, this is my business, this is what we're doing. But they usually kind of tiptoe around the ask. But what would you say is the best advice for someone to go in, just this is what I'm looking for and this is what I need, without being afraid to do that? Entering a new space, people are so comfortable networking with each other, and the younger generations don't necessarily really feel comfortable in that space. And the second question I have is, how much time do you recommend leaders start, or how much time do you recommend we spend on networking? Is it 20% of your time? Is it 50% of your time? What does that look like? And let's say, for example, I meet Cheri and I have my one-on-one, but how do I nourish that relationship after? We have a great coffee session. How do I nourish that relationship without being too much? Or is there a such thing as being too much by going to her and asking for resources or advice or mentorship? So those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
So I want to start with the first one.
Go ahead.
Just because I think that everybody is going to be suited to answer that in their own way. And I think that Sarah should also chime in on the imposter syndrome that women tend to have, let alone generationally, because this is what she does. And she has a lot more research. I only have Elisa Garn's personal experience. But as far as the not knowing how to approach it, whether it's younger generation or not knowing the ask or just having some of that self-doubt, for me personally, this is not natural for me. I developed a personality to invest in networking when I got into recruiting, but prior to that, I was the type of person that maybe showed up to an event and pretended I had a smartphone. I just had a flip phone and I would go at a corner table and pretend like I was doing emails because I was terrified to talk to anyone. So people that know me now are like, nah, that's not real, because I've had to figure out how to craft this skill because it's necessary for the career path that I've chosen. So I first want to say, I totally understand. I have been there myself, and part of it does just come with the confidence that you get when you have more wins and you gain some experience that starts to crystallize into wisdom. And that part of that is just getting older. But I have personally also had to break into a new network with this entrepreneurship venture that I'm doing. Prior to this, again, like I was an HR person. How many of you people like your HR people? Nobody likes HR. Like I was not, okay, good. Tom, you're always the exception because you love everyone. But I think that most people have a little bit of a barrier, and we're expected to have a barrier with our employees. We want, to be caring and compassionate, but not too close. We can't be friends. So when I moved into getting into this entrepreneurship space, I didn't know investors. I don't know people like fellow startup founders. And as I have been entrenching myself into this network, it is 90% men, arguably 95% in Utah. It's very difficult for me to break through those barriers and battle the things like, am I a token female? Am I actually being invited because I have the opportunity to show up because I have value to add? I'm making these connections. So combating some of that is definitely difficult, but getting to the ask, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think with entrepreneurship specifically and in crowdfunding, what I've learned is when people say no, it's very rarely about you. It's usually you don't fit our fund, you're not at the right stage, we don't invest in your kind of business. And I got that advice very early on. And so now I like see myself as a missionary and I'm just knocking on doors. And most people are going to say no, but you know what? How can I provide value in the meantime? It's okay if you don't want to join my religion. Fine. Look, I don't wear sleeves. I'm not even part of it, but I can still try to offer value to those people that I connect with, even if the transaction doesn't end the way that I want it to. I think that makes it easier to make the ask because it doesn't feel one-sided and there's not an expectation of reciprocity. I know that we're getting close to time, so I'll stop there.
Yeah. Marisol, just contact me and tell me where I met you from, and I'll go through it. Let me just say, ask for money, get advice. Ask for advice, get money. And we can go, you and I can go from there, and I can talk you through it. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of women-led businesses. And our organization has probably done more women-led businesses than any other in the country because we've been in business for 40 years.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing, just in the spirit of like time here. One of the things, even though I'm on this panel, I'm not a natural networker. There's certain things that I do, and there's certain things that I enjoy doing. But walking into a room cold, meeting a bunch of new people is not high on my list either. One of the things that I found is that I had to get really uncomfortable at a later stage in life, moving cross country to a city knowing nobody, and just getting uncomfortable has now become comfortable. So for what that's worth, it may be very painful in the beginning, but the more you throw yourself into it, the more comfortable you'll get.
I see that there's another question on here from Carl. How would you recommend recruiting not just individuals, but entire networks and groups? We'll take the next minute to address that, and then we'll move on to close, but because our time is short, but I think that's a really great question.
Yeah, I put some comments in the chat there for Carl and for everyone. I think whatever industry sector you represent, or whatever your client base you're looking for, or whoever it is you want to meet. I mean, Mountain West Capital is a fantastic example. There's generally associations or other groups, VCOs and other, there's plenty of them. No matter where you're focused, there is one for you. That's usually a fairly good spot to try to bring people, together. So, and then, one of the questions that we were posed was any books, websites, and things of that nature, which I don't think we'll get to, but there's a really good book. I know Elisa's mentioned one, but a really good book that I've found that's really been helpful is called The Heart and Art of Net Weaving. And really what that is just finding people that share similar, similar points of view and pulling them together, and then being very intentional about what you are looking to get out of it. And then from there, always look to be a resource to them. And then I think once you start doing that, people will start gravitating towards you and your group. So I don't know if that helps, but that's my point of view on that.
I think it's worthwhile to also understand how an organization is resourced. So I'll just give you an example. You know, with Women Tech Council, we got approached a lot by folks who wanted to, connect with the network, leverage it, all of that thing. The challenge was that we were all working volunteer. So none of us were getting paid. So it was always a little bit off-putting when people would come and have these immediate asks to access our network when they'd never been present, never supported, never invested, and so just kind of, now there are organizations that full-time staff paid, that's what they do. So just kind of be sensitive to not every organization is resourced similarly, and some need folks to kind of invest that time and energy so that they can succeed. So just kind of be mindful of that when you approach groups.
Hey, I think that's all such a great, just such a great lead into our ending. We've only got a minute left, so I'm just going to say thank you to these wonderful, inspirational individuals. I am in awe of your careers and your style, your willingness to jump in, always contribute. I've learned a ton from all of you today. And just to summarize, what's more important than a solid network? In life, in business, in legacy companies, and emerging companies, it just really is about how we all come and support each other and just stay connected. It's just more important than ever. And when we present ourselves willing to serve others, and that's, just how we all end up winning. So thank you all for being here today. I encourage you to reach out to everybody that was on this call, because that's a great start to network. And I'm afraid that Devon's going to shut me off right now. But thank you. I really appreciate you all being here. And I just hope you have a great rest of your day, your night, and just the rising tides lift all of the boats. That's what I love to say with, it's a quote, I think, from John F. Kennedy. I just think we just all are here to help each other. So take care. I wish you all well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cheri.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's see. I got to start giving recording authority to people. Let's see. Is Peter Collister around? Wave at me if you're here, Peter. I don't see Peter yet. Oh, there's Peter. So, Peter, I'm going to give you authority to record. Did that work, Peter? Well, this jumps around sometimes.
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, and then Jerry Hayes. Jerry, wave at me, please. Jerry, give me a wave. There we are. Oh, I say, there we go, Jerry. I'm giving you a allow record. Okay, so you can record your session now and send it to me after. Arno, give me a wave. Where are you, Arno?